Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wheolya. Chapter 242. Prince Gyeongjin. Part 1. This is why quick-witted people are troublesome. The young voice coming from the mouth of eunuch Byum and eunuch of the Western Depot. As soon as they heard it, vigilance filled the eyes of Prince Gyeongjin and the chief eunuch of the Western Depot, Eunuch Ho. Having been with eunuch Byum for a long time, they could naturally distinguish him by his voice alone. Chief eunuch Ho spoke while pointing his soft sword. "You. Who the hell are you? There are definitely limitations with just the face. What? Seems like you were lucky back there." The corners of eunuch Byum's mouth twitched. Eunuch Byum, or rather the true identity behind that face, was Mok Gyeongjin. From the moment he entered Prince Gyeongjin's palace, Mok Gyeongjin had no intention of avoiding being discovered at all costs, and through them, he realized the weaknesses of the human skin mask. It was difficult to deceive the energy of a master with keen senses like Eunuch Ho, even if he could fool them with just the face. Without internal energy, it would be difficult with just deception. If he could manipulate the yang energy of internal energy, he would have imitated the unique energy emitted by eunuch Byum. However, Mok Gyeongjin's energy was different from others, so he couldn't do that. Moreover, if the voice was distinctly different or if he tried to deceive those who had known the face of this human skin for a long time, it was virtually impossible. Considering this, it could be said that he was lucky at the Yun Mok sword matter. That's because the real Mok Gyeongjin had such a bad reputation that he didn't interact with his half-siblings, let alone his servants. In conclusion, the human skin mask is not a card to be used in this way. It was difficult to deceive those who knew the face or were close to him. However, that didn't mean this was a useless card. If he changed his approach, he could create amusing situations like before. It depends on how you think about it. Right then. Swish. The soft sword of the chief eunuch Ho aimed at the space between his eyebrows. In an instant, Mok Gyeongjin slightly tilted his head back and narrowly dodged the tip of the soft sword. Swish. He dodged it? It may have looked like a light strike, but it was an extremely fast thrust that even masters at the pinnacle stage of Transcendent Realm would find difficult to avoid. Yet, when Mok Gyeongjin lightly dodged it, Eunuch Ho couldn't help but be inwardly surprised. This bastard is no ordinary person. It was a single thrust he had made with the intention of quickly subduing him, as it was in the presence of His Highness Prince Gyeongjin. It was difficult to ascertain his level based on his energy, which was barely detectable, but with this one move, it became clear. He's a master on par with me. If he was such a supreme master, he could assess the opponent's skill with just a single move. Eunuch Ho slightly bent and then straightened the wrist holding the soft sword. The soft sword wriggled like a living snake and aimed at Mok Gyeongjin in a peculiar direction. Swish. However, Mok Gyeongjin dodged the trajectory of the soft sword by simply taking half a step back. As if he had anticipated that he would dodge it, Eunuch Ho shouted. "Look here! An enemy has infiltrated." It was a cry infused with inner force. Outside, there were embroidered uniformed guards and eunuchs from the Western Depot. Calling for their help was not to repel this person but to evacuate His Highness. However, an enemy has infiltrated. An enemy has infiltrated. An enemy has infiltrated. At that moment, Eunuch Ho's voice resonated in the room like an echo. It wasn't just a voice but one infused with inner force, so it was so resounding that Prince Gyeongjin frowned and hastily covered his ears. Ugh. Damn it. Eunuch Ho's complexion darkened. The echo in this confined space was because the shout had bounced off and rebounded. Through this, Eunuch Ho could tell. He has surrounded the entire room with true energy. Even a master at the pinnacle stage of Transcendent Realm could cover a certain space with their true energy to block sound. Naturally, a master of this caliber wouldn't be unable to do so. Tap tap tap. Eunuch Ho displayed a peculiar footwork with quick, tottering movements. Distancing himself from Mok Gyeongjin, and then stood in front of Prince Gyeongjin. It was to protect him. Eunuch Ho sent a secret message to convey his thoughts. Your Highness, this person is no ordinary master. Even I won't be able to subdue him easily, so if an opportunity arises, you must leave this place, even if it means breaking the window. At his words, a glint flashed in Prince Gyeongjin's eyes. As the chief eunuch of the Western Depot, Eunuch Ho was a master of martial arts whose match was hard to find throughout the entire palace. This was the first time he had seen him show such vigilance. That meant the unknown person wearing Eunuch Beam's face was a dangerous individual and an outstanding master, right? Then, Prince Gyeongjin spoke to Mok Gyeongun, who was wearing Eunuch Beam's face. Hey, you. Who sent you here? Your Highness? Seeing his behavior, Chief Eunuch Ho inwardly clicked his tongue. It was no different from an assassin infiltrating the palace, yet in this situation, his master, whom he served, had the audacity to talk to such a person. He was truly bold. But there was no way such a person would obediently answer His Highness's question. Well, who could have sent me? Eunuch Ho frowned and looked at Mok Gyeongun. What the hell was he? If he had come to assassinate His Highness, there was no way he would answer such a question one by one. As he was puzzled, Prince Gyeongjin spoke calmly. For a master like you, whom even Eunuch Ho here is wary of, there are only 3 people who come to mind who could send you. They were the powerful figures of the palace, excluding himself. He thought it would be one of the 3, Hang Yoon, the Prime Minister who also served as the Admiral of the Central Navy, the Prince John, the Emperor's second prince, or Imperial Noble Consort Co. Seeing that they even had you imitate the face of Eunuch Beam, who can be considered my close aide, they seemed to have made up their mind. This was an excellent move, even in his own opinion. If it was said that he had died at the hands of Eunuch Beam, it would ultimately be concluded as an internal conflict. Although the embroidered uniform guards would investigate whether it was someone's instigation, it could be easily ended by eliminating the real Eunuch Beam. Prince Gyeongjin clicked his tongue and said, You must have killed Eunuch Beam, right? For a noble person, you're quite smart. Thank you for the compliment. At his calm tone, Mok Gyeongun was inwardly intrigued. Although it was amusing to see him misunderstand and speculate based on partial circumstances, he was indeed different from ordinary people, befitting a clan that ruled a country. It could be seen from how he tried to calmly unravel the situation while being tense. Mok Gyeongun smiled and said, Then you must know that further conversation is meaningless. With those words, Mok Gyeongun clenched his sword fingers. Sharp sword energy flowed out, and the air became heavy with murderous intent. It was to the extent that even Prince Gyeongjin, who had not learned martial arts, could feel it. It's suffocating. Faced with Mok Gyeongun's sharp aura, Eunuch Ho gripped his soft sword and assumed a fighting stance. Your Highness, while I hold off this person, you must leave no matter what. Chief Eunuch Ho, who repeated those words once more, tried to launch himself toward Mok Gyeongun. Right then, Prince Gyeongjin stopped him. Hold it. At his command, Eunuch Ho couldn't hide his troubled expression. If he were to release his fighting stance first in this situation, it would become difficult to protect Prince Gyeongjin. Nevertheless, Prince Gyeongjin persisted. Your Highness, that must not be done. This person is truly dangerous. It's fine, so stop. Your Highness. Didn't I say it's fine? I trust you. And if today is my last day, it would be my fate to go even if you don't stop him. At Prince Gyeongjin's words, Chief Eunuch Ho bit his lip and released his fighting stance. Since the opponent was a master who couldn't be let down his guard against, he didn't want to easily release his vigilance, but he couldn't disobey His Highness's order. Seeing this, Mok Gyeongun spoke with puzzlement. Doesn't seem like a good choice. At those words, Prince Gyeongjin clasped his hands together and showed courtesy toward Mok Gyeongun. Mok Gyeongun's eyes flickered at the sight. What kind of behavior was this all of a sudden? As he wondered, Prince Gyeongjin bowed his head and spoke. I am a person who values talent and respects the strong who deserve to be treated well. You respect the strong? That's right. I need many heroes like you for what I want to do. At Prince Gyeongjin's words, the chief eunuch of the Western Depot, Eunuch Ho, was troubled. His Highness's strong point, or rather his bad habit, had emerged. If there was a desirable talent, regardless of whether they were an enemy or an obstacle, he would first reach out to them. This could be used in a good way, but there were also cases where it wasn't. Especially if they were an enemy targeting his life. At that moment, Mok Jaeon spoke. "You're quite a unique person." At his tone, which sounded intrigued, Prince Gyeongjin couldn't help but feel inwardly relieved. If he were someone who showed no reaction at all despite his utmost courtesy, there would be no room for negotiation. However, showing such a reaction meant that he was someone who could be persuaded. "I may be unique or foolish, but I have a great desire for talented individuals." "It seems that way. Since the situation is like this, I'll be straightforward. I don't know whose request or order you received, but using an excellent talent like you for such a dirty job like assassination is no different from misusing resources." Misusing resources. It meant using the resources of one state in another state, implying that they were being used in a place where their true value was not recognized. "So, with a heart that earnestly desires talent, I want to invite you to become my person. I don't know what compensation you receive from them, but I am willing to treat you even better, so please become a pillar of support for me." Pillar of support. It referred to a person who could be entrusted with important tasks of a household or a country, meaning someone who could handle the most critical matters. Prince Gyeongjin's persuasive abilities and eloquence were close to being unrivaled. With his profound learning, he had made numerous talents his own people through such eloquence. It is said that people bow their heads to those who recognize their worth. I don't know whose person he is, but no one will be able to treat him as well as I can. Whether it was Imperial Noble Consort Co., who only had her body as a weapon, the arrogant and unmatched influential official Hang Yoon, or the cruel second prince, who believed his position had been stolen. Which one of them could match his magnanimity? Tremble, tremble. At that moment, Mok Jaeon lowered his head, covered his mouth with his palm, and slightly shook his face. It seemed as if he was emotionally overwhelmed. Seeing this, the corners of Prince Gyeongjin's mouth slightly rose. It appeared that this gamble, born from his desire for talent, had paid off. Prince Gyeongjin approached Mok Jaeon. "Your Highness." Prince Gyeongjin shook his head. "It's all right. This person has understood my intention." With those words, Prince Gyeongjin approached Mok Jaeon again and placed his hand on his right shoulder, laughing heartily. "Ha ha ha. It seems that I have virtue. To gain such an outstanding warrior with the capacity of a fortress." Suddenly, Prince Gyeongjin couldn't finish his sentence. That's because Mok Jaeon's face, as he lifted his head, was closer to boredom, as if he was forcibly holding back a yawn, rather than being overwhelmed by his eloquence. "You. I apologize. It seemed too obvious that I was trying to hold back a yawn, as it's not polite to yawn while you're delivering an impassioned speech." At those words, Prince Gyeongjin was dumbfounded. He had shown such courtesy and praised him, yet the only reaction he showed was holding back a yawn? This was equivalent to insulting him, a royal and a prince. Prince Gyeongjin was inwardly very displeased, but since he was too close to Mok Jaeon, he suppressed it and spoke in a gentle voice. "Perhaps my words were too long. Then let me put it simply. Please become my person." With those words, he clasped his hands together and bowed his head once more, showing courtesy. As a prince, he had lowered himself to this extent and praised him. If he had done this much, even this bastard should show sufficient sincerity. Stab. At that moment, something sharp pierced Prince Gyeongjin's left eyeball. Rather than the pain from the needle that suddenly pierced his eye, Prince Gyeongjin was startled and tried to push Mok Jaeon away. "Grab." However, Mok Jaeon grabbed his wrist, making it impossible to push him away. "You bastard." Seeing this scene, the enraged chief eunuch Ho hurriedly tried to save Prince Gyeongjin. However, if you don't want to see His Highness die, it's best to stay still. "You scoundrel." Chief eunuch Ho hesitated on the spot. He gritted his teeth. Even if His Highness had said it was alright, he should have somehow prevented him from getting close. Meanwhile, Prince Gyeongjin, who was squinting his left eye, spoke to Mok Jae-un in an incomprehensible tone. "Why are you doing this? I even showed courtesy and said I would treat you even better." "Ah. You're asking why I suddenly did that?" "Yes. Because you talk too much." Chapter 243. Prince Gyeongjin. Part 2. Sigh. Despite his courteous offer, which befit his status as royalty and a prince, the reason for stabbing his eye was simply because he talked too much. Prince Gyeongjin was so dumbfounded that he was momentarily at a loss for words. However, that was short-lived. Immense pain rushed in, from his pierced eye to a severe headache. "Ugh! Your Highness!" The chief eunuch of the Western Depot, Eunuch Ho, called out to him in a worried voice. Eunuch Ho was extremely furious. If it weren't for Prince Gyeongjin, he would have wanted to unleash killing techniques on that insolent scoundrel right away. But if he wasn't calm, His Highness might really lose his life. Suppressing his anger, Chief Eunuch Ho carefully spoke. "Please, I beg you to calm down. If you release His Highness unharmed, I promise not only to let you go safely but also to grant you anything you desire." "Anything I desire?" "That's right. If you release His Highness unharmed." At his words, Mok Jae-un smiled and said, "Ah. Then you can do anything for His Highness, right?" "That wasn't even worth mentioning." "Of course." Chief Eunuch Ho answered with emphasis in his voice. As the right-hand man who had served Prince Gyeongjin for a long time, he was willing to do anything for him. Mok Jae-un curled his lips and said, "Then, if you take your own life, I will release His Highness." "What?" At those words, Chief Eunuch Ho's expression froze for a moment. He had expected the fellow to demand something that would benefit him in some way, as he was human, but he never thought he would tell him to end his own life. Unable to suppress the anger he had been holding back, Eunuch Ho raised his voice. "Are you even calling that a proper request?" "Oh? Are you getting angry now?" "What? You said you could do anything for His Highness, but are you suddenly reluctant to give up your life?" At those words, Chief Eunuch Ho's face contorted. This cunning bastard was toying with him by creating a dilemma. This was clearly the fellow's scheme. If he were to die, the fellow would become even more unrestrained. However, if he said he couldn't die here, His Highness Prince Gyeongjin might doubt his loyalty. It was literally a dilemma where he couldn't do either. At that moment, Prince Gyeongjin, who had been holding his pierced eye in pain, opened his mouth. "Ugh. Eunuch Ho. Don't fall for this person's scheme while worrying about me." "Your Highness. I won't doubt your loyalty over such a thing." At Prince Gyeongjin's words, Mok Jae-un laughed and said, "You may talk a lot, but you're pretty good at assessing the situation." "Huh. Huh. The fact that you asked Eunuch Ho to take his own life means you can't easily subdue him, right?" "Well, you're not wrong. Chief Eunuch Ho was not someone who could be killed in an instant. Therefore, if he were to take his own life, things could become much easier." "Then, could your Highness tell Chief Eunuch to take his life on my behalf?" "If you do that, I'm willing to release you right away." "Don't say things you don't mean." "Things I don't mean? Even though I treated you with courtesy, you ended up like this. Do you think I would believe those words?" "Ah, I suppose that's true. I would never utter such words. Rather, there is only one command I would give Eunuch Ho." "What?" "Eunuch Ho. Don't worry about my safety and immediately break the window and go alert others of the enemy's infiltration." At those words, Mok Jae-un raised an eyebrow. Then, despite the pain, Prince Gyeongjin curled his lips and said, "You may be able to kill me here, but you won't be able to leave the palace alive." "You're making it interesting. Does this situation seem amusing to you? Then, can you really stop him if the head of the embroidered uniform guards, Southern Commander-in-Chief, arrives?" "Southern Commander-in-Chief?" At Prince Gyeongjin's words, Mok Jae-un's eyes narrowed. This was because, according to the information he had heard beforehand, one of the three people he should be most wary of in the palace was Southern Commander-in-Chief, known as the pinnacle of the embroidered uniform guards. He wasn't simply the pinnacle of the embroidered uniform guards. Southern Commander-in-Chief Gu Songbek. His other title as the protector of the emperor was the Blade King of the Northern Faction, the current pinnacle of the martial arts world and one of the six heavens. There were many famous anecdotes about him, one of which was the story of him splitting three large ships led by the Chongjiang water route stronghold on the Yangtze River with a single blade. Thanks to that tremendous feat, Southern Commander-in-Chief Gu Songbek newly added his prestige to the pinnacle of the martial arts world, which was originally called the Five Heavens, one of the six heavens. However, as the palace's supreme master, he never leaves the emperor's side even for a moment. Therefore, some in the martial arts world call him a hidden dragon or a famous blade trapped in its sheath. But the situation is different inside the palace. If the palace's masters, including the Southern Commander-in-Chief, arrive, do you think you can easily escape after harming me, no matter how outstanding a master you are? The reason Prince Gyeongjin said this to Mok Jaehyun was simple. It was to let him know that if he was prepared to risk his life, revenge could be taken immediately. I see. As if Mok Jaehyun had grasped the situation to some extent, Prince Gyeongjin spoke in a slightly softer tone. Then how about we both take a step back? Step back? That's right. I won't force you to become my subordinate. But you should also stop trying to kill me and leave. If you do that, I will stake my honor and treat this matter as if it never happened. This was the best measure Prince Gyeongjin could think of. It was a ploy to let him know that the situation was harmful to both of them and make him give up on his own. At his words, Mok Jaehyun smiled and said, "Your current approach is much better than your earlier verbose talk. Then will you accept my proposal? You don't even know my identity, so you have nothing to lose by retreating from here, right?" "That's true." "Then please release me." At those words, Mok Jaehyun stroked his chin as if pondering. Prince Gyeongjin was confident that if he wasn't truly prepared to risk his life, he would accept his proposal this time. At that moment, Mok Jaehyun opened his mouth. "I've thought about it, but I don't think there's any need for that." "You truly?" "No matter how I think about it, Chief Eunuch over there doesn't seem like he would let you die." "Huh?" Prince Gyeongjin clicked his tongue as if dumbfounded and said, "If I give the order, Chief Eunuch will unconditionally follow it." "You seem to be underestimating both me and Eunuch Ho." "It's not underestimating. As far as I know, the palace has strict laws and regulations, right?" "What are you trying to say?" "If you die, won't they hold those responsible for your safety accountable as well? And with death, no less." At those words, Prince Gyeongjin was rendered speechless. This was an undeniable fact. If he were to be assassinated by someone, according to the palace regulations, all the embroidered uniform guards and eunuchs who had guarded him would also be held accountable and executed. Prince Gyeongjin inwardly clicked his tongue. Since the enemy threatened his safety, he had proposed a method that could be a way out for both of them, without being too offensive. However, this cunning bastard had immediately found a flaw in his scheme that was hard to detect. In the end, Prince Gyeongjin had no choice but to gamble. "Chief Eunuch, can you give your life for me?" With those words, Prince Gyeongjin stared intently at Chief Eunuch Ho. He didn't truly mean for him to sacrifice himself. You just need to show the will to give your life. That way, this person might accept his proposal. Eunuch Ho's eyes were faintly trembling. No matter how much he had pledged loyalty as a subject, it was a matter of his own life, so he seemed to hesitate even at the word of gambling. However, as if he had understood the true intention in Prince Gyeongjin's eyes, he was about to answer with determination. But right at that moment, Mok Jaehyun spoke. Since your highness is being so resolute, I should make some concessions as well." "Concessions?" "Yes." "Then order Eunuch Ho to destroy his own Danjian. If you do that, I'll spare both your life and Eunuch Ho's life." "What?" At the words to destroy his Danjian, sparks flew from eunuch Ho's eyes. For a martial artist, destroying one's Danjian was not much different from giving up one's life. Because it meant the end of life as a martial artist. Although he had not learned martial arts, Prince Gyeongjin was not unaware of this, so he also raised his voice, unable to suppress his anger. Eunuch Ho is no different from my right arm. Telling him to destroy his Danjian is like cutting off my right arm. Do you think I would fall for such a scheme? That's not for you to decide. What? It depends on Eunuch Ho's choice. I'll count to 5. If he doesn't destroy his own Danjian within that time, I'll kill you. You bastard. Eunuch Ho couldn't hold back and snapped at him. He wanted to tear Mok Gyeongjin apart and kill him right away. However, if he did that, Prince Gyeongjin would likely die at the hands of that person. Meanwhile, Mok Gyeongjin sneered and said, I'm not even asking to kill him, just to give up martial arts to save you. If you can't even do that, you don't have any loyalty at all. What? You. Then why are you hesitating? I'm saying I'll spare both your life and his. Is it that difficult? Is martial arts more important than His Highness? Ah, I see. Well, if you're someone who values your own life, of course, martial arts would be precious too. In the end, when you peel back a layer, what's important to humans is their own selves. You bastard. Under Mok Gyeongjin's pressure, pushing Eunuch Ho like this, Prince Gyeongjin's complexion darkened. This person was extremely skilled at psychologically driving the opponent to the extreme, to the point of suffocation. It could be seen from Eunuch Ho's wavering appearance. At this rate, it seemed like he would really give in. Ho Gong. Grab. Ugh. At that moment, Mok Gyeongjin grabbed Prince Gyeongjin's neck. Prince Gyeongjin, whose throat was blocked, coughed with a red face. You. 1. As he was about to say something, Mok Gyeongjin started counting. The moment he heard 1, Eunuch Ho's expression hardened, and he was at a loss, unable to do anything. Was this fellow really trying to kill His Highness? No, from the moment he appeared wearing something like Eunuch Beam's human skin mask, it might have been a given. 2. Eunuch Ho bit his lip hard. He had only 2 choices. Either destroy his own Danjian as the fellow said, or break through the door as His Highness ordered, alert others of the enemy's infiltration, and seek help. However, if it was the latter, His Majesty the Emperor would certainly hold him accountable. In that case, the death penalty was definitely set. Crunch. Whichever he chose, it was the worst situation for him. At that moment, he saw Prince Gyeongjin, whose neck was being held, gesturing something toward him with his hand. It was, He was pointing to his belly with his hand. In other words, it meant to destroy his own Danjian. Seeing this, Eunuch Ho's eyes sank heavily. In the end, when his life was in danger, Prince Gyeongjin chose his own safety over the aftermath. 3. As the word 3 came out of Mok Gyeongjin's mouth, strength entered Eunuch Ho's hand holding the soft sword. In that fleeting moment, countless thoughts flashed through Eunuch Ho's mind. And finally, he made his choice. It was none other than Pack. As Eunuch Ho threw the soft sword infused with strong energy toward Mok Gyeongjin, he immediately launched himself, smashed the window, and fled. Chief Eunuch. At this sight, Prince Gyeongjin's eyes widened as if they would tear apart from the sense of betrayal. In the end, he had chosen his Danjian instead of saving him. Tap tap tap. Eunuch Ho, who had broken through the window, bit his lip hard. It was an unavoidable choice for him. He had a way to escape the palace itself if worse came to worst regarding the palace's laws and the responsibility that would follow, but there was no answer if his Danjian was destroyed. What if that fellow changed his words and killed both him with a destroyed Danjian and His Highness? Then it would become an even worse situation. Your Highness, I apologize. In the end, you also thought of your own safety rather than mine, didn't you? And even if the fellow kept his promise and spared His Highness's life, he didn't think Prince Gyeongjin would employ him again with a destroyed Danjian. In that case, it was better to plan for the future. However, as eunuch Ho, who had gone outside to raise an alarm, frowned. What's this? The surroundings of the palace were too quiet. Within the Gyeongjin palace alone, there were dozens of embroidered uniform guards and palace guards. Yet, he couldn't feel their presence at all. What on earth was going on? Thinking something was strange, eunuch Ho thought he should escape from the palace for now, considering that the fellow might chase after him. So, as he was about to launch himself out of the palace, tock tock. The sound of footsteps came from the direction of the palace gate's pavilion. Eunuch Ho unconsciously looked in that direction. There, he saw a stunningly beautiful woman in splendid red and gold clothes walking toward him, holding something in one hand. At that moment, eunuch Ho's expression hardened. Because the moment he saw the woman's face, he immediately recognized who she was. Consort Ho? Chapter 244. Prince Gyeongjin. Part 3. Consort Ho. The emperor had numerous women. Among them, there was one woman who received his particular favor, imperial noble consort Co. However, the dynamics within the inner court, which seemed like they would be maintained for a long time, changed at some point. It was because of the sudden appearance of Consort Ho. A peerless beauty that one couldn't help but be captivated by. Everyone who saw Consort Ho showered her with praise. The appearance of the palace maid who had just entered the palace was so outstanding that rumors spread, saying her beauty rivaled that of imperial noble consort Co in her prime. The woman who entered the palace as a maid rose to the position of consort in just 3 years by enchanting the emperor with her appearance alone, without any backing. As a result, even the 4 most powerful figures in the palace had recently become most wary of this woman who had captured the emperor's heart. But why had Consort Ho appeared in the Gyeongjin palace, Prince Gyeongjin's territory? And without any attendants or palace maids to serve her, no less. Something was very strange. Tock tock. In her hand as she walked, there was a fairly large cloth bundle, making it even more puzzling. However, rather than her strange appearance, Chief Eunuch Ho of the Western Depot had to hurry and inform the emperor's residence of the enemy's infiltration, so he hastily clasped his hands together and bowed to her, saying, Consort Ho, I apologize for not being able to properly pay my respects due to the urgent situation. An unidentified enemy has infiltrated His Highness's quarters, so, enemy? That's right. Therefore, I must request assistance, so I ask that you please return, madam. I shall. Wait. At that moment, she called out to Eunuch Ho. As the situation was already urgent, Eunuch Ho unintentionally answered in an irritated voice. Madam, there's no time for this. Swish. At that moment, Consort Ho threw the cloth bundle she was holding to Eunuch Ho. The cloth bundle looked quite heavy, as it was sagging, but when she lightly threw it with one hand, Eunuch Ho caught it with a puzzled expression. Pack. She threw this with one hand? It was indeed quite heavy. Since he was a man and had learned martial arts, he could easily catch it, but wasn't Consort Ho an ordinary woman who hadn't even learned martial arts? Eunuch Ho asked. Madam, I don't know what this is, but I don't think I can deliver it to His Highness right away. Look inside and see what it is. At her commanding and arrogant tone, Eunuch Ho frowned. Although she received the emperor's favor, he was the chief eunuch of the Western Depot, so he deserved some respect to a certain extent. Therefore, Eunuch Ho thought he should just ignore her for now and leave. After all, he had shown the minimum courtesy. Thud. Eunuch Ho set the cloth bundle she had thrown on the floor. And just as he was about to kick off the ground and launch himself. Pack. At that moment, the wrapped cloth bundle opened on its own, and something inside popped out. Unconsciously seeing this, Eunuch Ho was startled and took about half a step back. That's because inside the cloth bundle was none other than a severed human head. And not just any head, but the head of a woman. This woman is. Eunuch Ho immediately recognized whose head it was. The owner of this head was none other than the palace maid who had been assigned to Consort Ho's auspicious palace. Just put a little bit of this powder in soup dishes or strongly seasoned food. Are you sure it will be all right? Don't worry. This secret medicine is difficult to detect even for those who have learned martial arts or physicians with sensitive tongues. So, make sure to add it every day without fail. Understood, Chief Eunuch. It was even the palace maid he had met not long ago to receive a progress report. The moment he saw the severed head of that palace maid, Eunuch Ho couldn't help but reveal his emotions. No, he couldn't help it. The palace maid who had died with her neck severed wasn't dead with a distressed face, but was smiling brightly as if she was happy. This was utterly eerie. As he was at a loss for words due to this, a voice reached his ears. She looks so happy, doesn't she? Swish. Along with that voice, a hand rested on his shoulder. And with a fragrance so sweet that it tickled his nose, Eunuch Ho's eyes shook wildly. When did this woman get so close to him? Even though he was surprised to see the severed head of the palace maid, he wasn't so disoriented that he couldn't sense someone's presence. Could it be that she has learned martial arts? No, but for that. There wasn't even a trace of her having learned martial arts. If one had learned even a little bit of martial arts, it would show in their walking posture or movements. Even the structure of their body would change to suit martial arts. However, Consort Ho was not like that at all. From her footsteps to everything else, it was difficult to find any traces of her having learned martial arts. As he was confused, Consort Ho's voice was heard. You know, I'm rather refined, so I quite enjoy cooking in addition to raw food. But one day, someone started tampering with the food I enjoyed eating. Madam, what are you saying right now? Swish. Before he could finish speaking, Consort Ho's soft and small hand touched Eunuch Ho's neck. There was nothing particularly stimulating his senses, but the moment her hand touched him, he instinctively felt a chill run down his spine. I'm not done talking yet. Eunuch Ho unconsciously swallowed his dry saliva. What the hell was this woman? Just being close to her made it uncomfortable to breathe due to an inexplicable pressure. Was she truly an incredibly supreme master beyond imagination? As he thought that, she continued speaking. It's really interesting. Humans do similar things in every era. Whether it's decades ago, centuries ago, or millennia ago, as soon as they're slightly displeased, the first thing they tamper with is the food. Madam, I'm truly sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Playing dumb is also the same. Enough. Pardon? I just need to have some raw food for a change. Stab. At that moment, something burst through Eunuch Ho's chest. It was none other than... Ugh. Ugh. A hand grasping his heart. Eunuch Ho's eyes widened as if they would tear apart. The sight of his heart, gripped by a blood-stained hand, beating and pounding, made him feel like he was going crazy. In his ear, Consort Ho whispered softly. A freshly extracted human heart is a delicacy because it's so fresh. It's yours, but do you want a taste? At those words, Eunuch Ho, who had been coughing and turning pale, finally lowered his head. Seeing him die faster than expected, Consort Ho pulled out the hand she had pierced through him and muttered regretfully. Maybe I should have tormented him a bit more before killing him. Now that she had killed him, it felt like she had done it too easily. Then, shaking her head, she brought the heart she was holding to her mouth. Chomp. And took a crisp bite as if eating an apple. Chew. After thoroughly chewing and swallowing the heart, Consort Ho savored it with her eyes closed. Ah, this is why I can't quit raw food. Boiled, grilled, and fried foods were delicacies, but they weren't staples. She only felt like she was eating when blood and meat juices overflowed. Like that, Consort Ho quickly devoured the faintly beating heart. It didn't take long for her to eat it all. That was a good meal. Consort Ho wiped the blood from the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief in a refined manner, like a lady. After wiping the blood, Consort Ho turned her head toward Prince Gyeongjin's quarters. Then, with an intrigued look in her eyes and a twitch of her lips, she grabbed the hair of the dead Eunuch Ho's head. Around the same time in Prince Gyeongjin's quarters. Swish. Thud. Mok Gyeongjin released his grip on Prince Gyeongjin's neck. Prince Gyeongjin, whose legs had lost strength, knelt on the floor. Although he had tried to hold him as gently as possible, Prince Gyeongjin, who had been suffocating from having his neck grabbed, coughed and caught his breath. Cough, cough. Looking down at him, Mok Gyeongjin shrugged and said, "An unexpected outcome." Cough, cough, what? I thought that since he was someone who served you, if he had even a shred of loyalty, he would choose to save your life and his own, no matter what. He had emotionally pushed him into a corner, but the result was slightly different from what he had expected. Mok Gyeongjin smiled at this outcome. It seems that for those who have learned martial arts, their Danjian is much more precious than their loyalty to their master or their life. At Mok Gyeongjin's words, Prince Gyeongjin, who had finally caught his breath, clenched his fists. He inwardly felt betrayed by Chief Eunuch Ho's actions. Since he had served him for a long time, he thought he would act according to his intentions. However, he never expected him to choose to preserve his martial arts, contrary to those intentions. Eunuch Ho, how could you? It was truly disappointing beyond words. To him, Mok Gyeongjin said with a smile. It's quite unfortunate. To think that a trusted subordinate would choose your death. At those words, Prince Gyeongjin spoke with anger in his eyes. Are you going to kill me? Since Eunuch Ho made his choice, shouldn't I? Hack. At that moment, Prince Gyeongjin prostrated himself toward Mok Gyeongjin and spoke in a desperate voice. Spare me. He no longer had any dignity or pride as a prince. Mok Gyeongjin's lips twitched, and he bent down and whispered in the ear of the prostrating Prince Gyeongjin. You know that sparing you won't benefit me at all, right? Please, spare me. I don't want to die like this. You've become quite honest. With a shred of self-esteem remaining, Prince Gyeongjin didn't respond to those words. Then, he spoke with a strained voice. If you spare my life, I will shift the blame for your crimes onto Eunuch Ho. Oh. I cannot forgive Eunuch Ho for turning his back on me like this. You're saying you'll make it seem like Eunuch Ho did everything. That's right. At his words, Mok Gyeongjin smiled and said, for once, your thoughts and mine align. At those words, Prince Gyeongjin's expression brightened. He hadn't had high hopes, but it was no different from taking a gamble with a last-ditch effort. But he never expected it to unexpectedly work. Well, from this person's perspective, if he killed him, the situation would spiral out of control, so it could be a natural choice. Then let us come to an agreement. There's no need for that. What? To Prince Gyeongjin, who questioned him, Mok Gyeongjin whispered meaningfully. You just need to give me that body of yours. It happened as soon as those words ended. Shiver. Ugh. The prostrating Prince Gyeongjin's eyes rolled back, and violent convulsions occurred throughout his body. Then, as he gradually stabilized, his eyes returned to normal. No, his eyes had changed from usual. Prince Gyeongjin got up and opened his mouth. I never thought the day would come when I would possess a prince's body. Disciple. The one who had taken over that body was none other than Chang Ryong. As if she was pleased to possess someone else's body for the first time in a long while, Chang Ryong clenched and unclenched her fists, showing a satisfied expression. To her, Mok Gyeongjin shrugged and said, well, it's not bad since it's been a while since you possessed someone, right? Well, entering such a noble body isn't too bad. Startle. Chang Ryong stopped mid-sentence and turned her head toward the door. It wasn't just her. Mok Gyeongjin, who had been smiling until just now, also looked at the door with sharpened eyes. Thud. Soon, the door opened, and a beautiful woman wearing splendid red and gold clothes appeared. The woman who had suddenly appeared smiled radiantly, then held up the torn head of Chief Eunuch Ho and said, won't you let me join in too, guys?